The pattern seems inexplicable at first glance. After a painful breakup, you promise yourself, never again, only to find yourself drawn to someone with the same red flags as your ex. Or perhaps you've watched a friend repeatedly choose partners who are emotionally unavailable, controlling, or even abusive, despite their conscious desire for a healthy relationship. This seemingly self-destructive pattern isn't random or simply bad luck. It reflects profound psychological mechanisms that Sigmund Freud was among the first to identify and explain. Freud recognized that humans possess an uncanny tendency to repeat painful relationship dynamics, even while consciously desiring happiness. This contradiction between what we say we want and what we unconsciously pursue reveals the complex, often contradictory nature of human desire. Understanding this contradiction is the first step toward breaking destructive patterns and creating genuinely fulfilling relationships. The central insight comes from Freud's concept of the repetition compulsion, our unconscious drive to recreate familiar situations, especially painful ones from childhood. This isn't masochism in the conventional sense. It's the mind's attempt to master past trauma by unconsciously recreating similar scenarios, as if trying for a different outcome this time. Like a person returning to the scene of an accident, the psyche revisits emotional wounds in an attempt to heal them. This compulsion operates most powerfully in our closest relationships because they activate our earliest attachment patterns. The relationships with our primary caregivers, usually our parents, create templates in our developing brains for what love feels like, how safe connection is, and what we must do to maintain it. These templates operate beneath conscious awareness, guiding our attractions and behaviors in adult relationships. The most counterintuitive aspect of this pattern is that we're not randomly attracted to people who hurt us. We're specifically attracted to people who hurt us in familiar ways. The pain itself feels oddly comfortable because it matches our internal model of what relationships are supposed to feel like. This explains why the red flags that should warn us away instead often feel like signs of chemistry or excitement. Consider the child whose parent offered love inconsistently, warmth and approval followed by cold withdrawal or criticism. This child learns that love and pain are intertwined, that emotional connection inherently involves anxiety and pursuit. As an adult, consistent, stable affection might actually feel boring or inauthentic compared to the emotional roller coaster they've come to associate with love. Freud understood that childhood experiences don't just affect us, they become us. They shape our definition of what love is and how relationships function. Someone raised with consistent emotional support develops very different relationship expectations than someone whose caregivers were unpredictable, rejecting, or intrusive. These differences manifest not just in conscious beliefs, but in unconscious attractions and bodily responses. This insight fundamentally challenges the common advice to just avoid people who treat you badly. Such advice assumes we consciously choose damaging relationships, when in reality, our attractions often operate beneath awareness. The person consistently drawn to hurtful partners isn't choosing pain consciously. They're following unconscious patterns laid down decades earlier. Neurological research confirms aspects of Freud's theory. Early relationship patterns literally shape brain development, creating neural pathways that become our template for processing later relationships. The emotional brain doesn't distinguish between patterns that feel familiar because they're healthy and patterns that feel familiar because they're what we've always known. Familiarity itself triggers attachment responses, even when what's familiar is harmful. The body's role in this pattern is crucial. We often discuss attraction as if it were primarily cognitive, but much of attraction happens through bodily responses we don't consciously control. Someone with a history of unpredictable relationships may literally experience physical anxiety as excitement and chemistry. Their nervous system has learned to associate relationship uncertainty with the neurochemical signatures of love. This explains the common experience of feeling intense chemistry with exactly the wrong people. the very qualities that make someone a poor partner, emotional unavailability, unpredictability, subtle controlling behaviors, can trigger our attachment systems precisely because they match our internal expectations about relationships. Meanwhile, healthier potential partners may feel boring or fail to activate our attachment responses at all. Freud's concept of the Madonna whore complex illuminates another dimension of attraction to painful relationships. This psychological pattern involves splitting women into two categories: pure, respected figures, Madonnas, and sexualized, devalued ones, whores. Men with this complex often pursue relationships with women they secretly devalue, creating dynamics almost guaranteed to become painful for both parties. For women, the parallel pattern might involve dividing men into safe but unsexy nice guys and exciting but dangerous bad boys. This split reflects early experiences where safety and desire became disconnected. When nurturing and passion weren't integrated in the parental relationship we witnessed, we may struggle to recognize partners who offer both qualities together. Freud's theory of transference, the unconscious projection of past relationships onto current ones, further explains these patterns. We don't see new potential partners objectively. We view them through the lens of our past experiences, particularly our earliest attachments. This projection happens instantly and unconsciously, creating immediate feelings of familiarity or connection that may have little to do with the actual person before us. These dynamics become particularly powerful during periods of stress or transition. When we feel vulnerable, our attachment systems activate more strongly, increasing our tendency to fall into familiar patterns even if they're unhealthy. This explains why people often begin damaging relationships during or shortly after significant life changes, moves, job changes, losses, or other transitions that trigger attachment insecurity. The psychoanalytic concept of compromise formations offers additional insight. Our psyche attempts to satisfy multiple competing needs simultaneously, including both our desire for health and our compulsion to repeat familiar patterns. Choosing someone who initially seems healthy but gradually reveals harmful behaviors satisfies both the conscious desire for growth and the unconscious pull toward familiarity. Gender socialization compounds these individual patterns. Women in many cultures receive messages that love requires sacrifice and caretaking, while men often learn that vulnerability threatens masculinity. These cultural patterns interact with individual psychology to normalize painful dynamics. The woman who constantly manages her partner's emotions may be repeating both personal history and cultural programming about feminine nurturing. What Freud called identification with the aggressor explains another aspect of attraction to hurtful partners. When we've been harmed in childhood, we sometimes unconsciously identify with the person who hurt us as a way of gaining a sense of control. By choosing partners who embody aspects of harmful caregivers, we symbolically place ourselves in the more powerful position, even if we're actually repeating our victimization. The concept of traumatic bonding, developed by modern trauma theorists, builds on Freud's insights. When relationships alternate between affection and abuse, especially unpredictably, they create powerful biochemical bonds. The intermittent reinforcement of occasional warmth after pain triggers dopamine release patterns, similar to addiction, creating attachments that can be stronger than consistently positive relationships. Freud's observations about masochism add another dimension to understanding these patterns. He distinguished between moral masochism, our unconscious sense of needing to suffer to be worthy of love, and more direct forms of seeking pain. Someone with moral masochism doesn't consciously want suffering, but unconsciously believes they deserve it or must endure it to prove their worth or devotion. This connects to Freud's concept of the superego, our internalized moral authority derived primarily from parental figures. A harsh, punitive superego creates the unconscious belief that we deserve criticism, control, or even abuse. When a partner treats us harshly, it paradoxically feels right because it confirms our deep beliefs about our own value and what we deserve in relationships. Family systems theory extends Freud's insights by examining how entire family patterns are internalized and repeated. If you grew up in a home where love and conflict were constantly intertwined, where affection was expressed through control, or where intimacy and violation weren't clearly distinguished, these patterns become your implicit definition of closeness. Relationships that don't match this template may not even register as potential romantic connections. Attachment theory, while developed after Freud, provides empirical support for many of his observations. Researchers identify several attachment styles that develop in response to early caregiving experiences: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. People with anxious attachment often seek partners with avoidant attachment, recreating the pursuit-distance dynamic that feels familiar from childhood relationships with inconsistent caregivers. What makes these patterns particularly resistant to change is their pre-verbal nature. Many of our most powerful relationship expectations formed before we had language to understand or describe them. They exist not as conscious beliefs, but as implicit expectations encoded in our nervous systems. This explains why insight alone, understanding the pattern intellectually, often isn't sufficient to change it. The healing process requires creating new experiences that contradict these implicit expectations. Therapy provides one context for this, offering a relationship that can gradually disconfirm harmful expectations. The therapeutic relationship itself becomes a laboratory where new patterns can develop as the client experiences being consistently seen, respected, and valued, even when expressing needs or vulnerabilities. Romantic relationships can provide similar corrective experiences, but only when we choose partners capable of consistent care and respect. This creates a challenging catch-22. We need healthy relationships to develop healthier attractions, but our current attractions often lead us away from the very partners who could help us heal. Breaking this cycle typically requires a period of conscious override, deliberately choosing partners based on evidence of their character, rather than feelings of chemistry or excitement. This doesn't mean settling for someone who doesn't attract you, but rather recognizing that initial attraction may not be a reliable guide, and giving relationships time to develop based on behavior rather than immediate feelings. Self-awareness plays a crucial role in this process. When we recognize our patterns, whom we're attracted to and under what circumstances, we create space between impulse and action. This awareness doesn't immediately change the attraction itself, but allows us to respond to it differently, making choices based on our long-term well-being, rather than immediate emotional responses. Body-based approaches provide another pathway to change. Since attachment patterns live in the body as much as the mind, somatic therapies that address the nervous system's response to relationships can be particularly effective. These approaches help recalibrate the physical sensations of safety and danger, gradually separating the experience of safety from boredom and danger from excitement. The role of fantasy in maintaining these patterns shouldn't be underestimated. Freud recognized that we're drawn not just to certain types of partners, but to specific dynamics that allow us to enact internal psychological dramas. Understanding our recurring relationship fantasies, rescue, redemption, conquest, sacrifice, helps identify the unconscious scenarios we're attempting to play out with partners who hurt us. Cultural narratives often reinforce these harmful patterns. From fairy tales to modern films, the transformation of the cruel or damaged partner through the protagonist's love remains a powerful theme. These narratives normalize harmful behavior by framing it as a challenge to overcome rather than a pattern to avoid, validating the unconscious belief that suffering is the path to love. Social media and dating apps inadvertently amplify these dynamics by prioritizing immediate chemistry over sustained compatibility. The focus on instant connection rewards the very physical responses often associated with repeating destructive patterns. The immediate excitement and anxiety that feel like attraction, but may actually signal the activation of old wounds. Healing ultimately requires integrating the split between excitement and safety. As long as these qualities remain separated in our psychological experience, safe partners boring us while dangerous ones excite us. We remain vulnerable to harmful relationships. The goal isn't abandoning passion, but recognizing that genuine passion becomes possible only when basic safety exists. This integration happens gradually as we accumulate experiences that contradict our harmful expectations. Each positive interaction with a respectful partner, each instance of having boundaries honored, each experience of vulnerability met with care rather than exploitation creates new neural pathways. Over time, these new pathways can become strong enough to override the older, harmful ones. Freedom from attraction to harmful partners doesn't mean perfect relationships or an absence of conflict. It means relationships where conflict doesn't threaten basic safety, where disagreement doesn't lead to devaluation, and where both partners remain committed to mutual growth and respect, even during difficult times. This is the realistic alternative to both harmful volatility and idealized perfection. The process isn't linear. Even as we develop healthier patterns, stress or triggers can temporarily activate older response systems. What changes with healing isn't the complete disappearance of harmful attractions, but our relationship to them, recognizing them as echoes of past wounds rather than guides to present choices. This recognition creates the space for choice, where previously there seemed to be only compulsion. The ultimate transformation involves not just whom we're attracted to, but how we experience attraction itself. As we heal, attraction becomes less about anxiety, obsession, and the need to secure someone's inconsistent attention. It evolves into a calmer but deeper recognition of genuine compatibility and potential for growth together. Excitement remains but emerges from possibility rather than fear. Freud's insight wasn't that we're doomed to repeat painful patterns, but that understanding these patterns creates the possibility of transformation. By bringing unconscious processes into awareness, we gain the capacity to choose differently, not by denying our psychological history, but by recognizing its influence and gradually developing new, healthier templates for connection. The journey from attraction to people who hurt us toward genuine, mutually nurturing relationships represents one of adulthood's most significant psychological achievements. It requires courage to examine patterns we've long taken for granted, compassion for the younger self who developed these patterns as survival strategies, and patience with the gradual process of creating new, healthier attractions. What emerges on the other side of this transformation isn't just healthier partner selection, but a more integrated relationship with ourselves. As we heal the splits between safety and passion, between what we consciously want and what we unconsciously pursue, we develop greater internal coherence. This integration creates the foundation for relationships that support rather than undermine our well-being and growth. The most hopeful aspect of Freud's theory is that these patterns, though powerful, aren't permanent. The same psychological flexibility that allowed us to adapt to difficult early environments allows us to adapt again to healthier ones. Through conscious awareness, consistent new experiences, and often therapeutic support, we can gradually transform not just whom we choose, but what love itself means to us.